Hi and welcome. My name's Brian Goldberg from Investors Org, and I am thrilled that Franz Madlener has come here to join us and give us an insight on startup investment. So welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
You're entrepreneurial, you're business minded, you're a people's person from what I know, and I've known you for a few years. But
Indeed.
But tell me about what you look for in startups and what you look for when you do investments and what you think will make a good business, and that's what gets you interested.
It's a really good question. There's a lot of questions in there. As a starting point with startups is the question of how quickly can this thing really kick off? How quickly can it work? And I think there's too much pressure on startup founders, and then on investors for everything to happen really quickly. And what I'm finding is that in a lot of instances, startup founders or the startup team are completely overselling how quickly this will get traction. Right. And in part, they're probably doing that because they feel that that's what they have to pitch in order to get the investment. Equally, when investors are going in and putting questions or looking at the numbers from the founders or the startup team, they're trying to understand how they can fast track that, or how quickly do they think they can get to the next level. And so both the investors and the founders, it's all a sort of a race to the top of the bullshit ladder, how quickly they can get this thing firing and returning. And what then sometimes happens is you take what is essentially a really good business or really good business idea as a startup, but the expectations of it far exceed its ability to deliver. And so then you find people, either founders or the investors, trying to find other ways to generate cash. So they take the eye off the ball of what the original business model was, or people simply give up. Or the worst case scenario is not enough money and time, or money in particular, was put in to let it play the long game.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good insight on the game that's played when seeking investment. So how do you, Franz, decipher and self-assess what's going on before looking at it as a genuine investment opportunity, or before seeing that what the fluff and what the desperate measure of success versus what could be achieved?
Years and years ago, at Monash, I had a lecturer and talking about the fundamentals of business, and he was old school, and Dr. Alan Treadgold was his name, actually. And he said it's very simple in business. The first year you budget to lose money. The second year you budget to break even. The third year you budget to get back the money you lost in the first year, and then you're off and running. And it's probably one of the only things I really remember from uni, but it kind of rings true a little bit that when you look at numbers, that there's actually been an appropriate budget for loss in that first period of time. It's unrealistic to expect every business and every business model to be able to spit out profit straight away. So what is that budget for loss? Is it realistic? Have we budgeted enough for that loss, and how are we going to carry it, and how's the business going to deal with it? Then if we're saying that we want to transition from that loss into profit, it doesn't happen like that. You don't just sort of go loss, profit. You've got to try to get to a break-even scenario, and that it's not an artificial break-even scenario where you fudge some numbers in some sheets to make it look like that. It's then budgeting to say, how long can we stay at that break-even position? So we know that we are actually breaking even, and that the margin plus or minus above that line is minimal and it's controllable. And then once we know we've been able to maintain a business at a true break-even for a period of time, then what are the kickers? What's going to kick in to deliver the profit? And is that profit going to be enough that by the end of year 3, you're pretty well back to that position now where you're talking about a true profit income coming in and what that then looks like from the numbers.
Right, so that's interesting. So the startup potentially turns into a business, which turns into a scale-up opportunity.
Yes, correct. And when you look at that, then you've got to ask the question, well, if that's a business, a financial model that I can understand and I can look at funding, how does a business sit into the life cycle of the space that it's operating in?
Right.
Because I'm a great believer that there's all parts of the business, it's like a wave. And if on that wave, if the analogy is like if you're trying to surf a wave, if you try to catch that wave too early, you can paddle and paddle and paddle and expend all this energy, and by the time the wave actually comes, you're burnt out. If you catch the wave too late, it doesn't matter how quickly you try to adapt to what's coming, you're just going to get dumped. You're not going to be able to catch it. You've missed it. But if you get that timing right, you can ride it and you can ride it right in. And so if you're talking about the financial modelling of a startup and it being able to see through a period of time, so loss, break even, profit, how does that fit into where it sits on the wave? Is it going to also be able to meet the timing of that so that you're not going to get dumped on the way through?
I love that analogy. I love it. Not that I've crashed in so many waves that I needed that advice years ago before I bought my surfboard, but that's really a clear, articulate way of looking at it. That's fantastic, especially from the Aussie. You've spent time at the beach?
Well, spent time getting dumped. Yeah.
Getting
Yes. And that's just on the front beach. That's just on the front beach, not on the back beach.
On the back beach. And tell me about, do opportunities need to be international, coming from Australia to excite you as an investor or the investor community, or can you give significant substance to know they're a locally focused startup business?
Well, it depends on what you're looking for. I mean, some investors are really looking for vanity stock. So they're looking for something that they can pin up and say, oh well, you know, this is scaling on a global market, and it's got to reach through to 163 countries, and so there's that vanity element to it, but it's not necessarily any more profitable than if you invested the same amount of money into a local market. It just sounds a bit more sexy. So removing whether it's local in the true sense, it's in your local community, if it's in the city, if it's in the state, if it's in Australia, if it's in English-speaking countries, or if it's global, forget about all of that, just look at the numbers and say, well, what are the numbers going to do? And which part of that can I actually bank as real numbers, and which part of that is just sort of dreamscape stuff? And so that comes back to that financial modelling. Scalability internationally, yes, it's critical. Yes, it should be there. And that's, I guess, as investors, that's what we all hope for. You know, that we have a horse that wins the Melbourne Cup. We all want to buy into that.
Right.
But equally too, sometimes you just need a good working horse that's going to give you a nice return on what's being ploughed out every day. So it depends on what you're looking for as your mix, but you can get just as good as return on something local as you can on something that aims itself as being international.
No, that's right. And now a focus on the founders themselves.
Yep.
Everyone's got different thinking on what a founder should be that
Yep.
could interest you
Yep.
and get you or investors interested. What do you look for, Franz?
And listening to thoughts that other people have had in this chair, and certainly there's no right or wrong. I think the idea needs to be able to live and breathe and survive and thrive beyond the founder. So what are we investing in? If we want to invest in people, then we're sort of in the human capital game and hoping that they can produce something, or are we investing into a business model that can spin out profit pretty quickly? And so the founder is important in the sense that they're part of the team that helps deliver on that business model, that it can spit out profit, but it's not the founder themselves that is going to spit out the profit. It's the business model. And so if that founder was to walk away tomorrow, whether you had a fallout or a payout or they got hit by a bus, will that idea continue? Is it strong enough to continue on? Is it strong enough so that anyone that is good enough can get behind there and still make it happen? And the idea has to be greater than the individual, not the individual greater than the idea.
Yeah, that makes excellent sense. That's really insightful. Thank you. And
my pleasure.
And tell me, what are you up to now? You're keeping busy?
Keeping busy. I've been lucky enough to be asked by several organisations to work in the mentor space, to go in and help start up organisations, come in as a mentor and maybe help them pull together a bit of an advisory team. There was a very successful business person in Melbourne that recently asked me to come and work with him as a mentor. And we sat down and we had a coffee and we had a chat. And I said, look, why is it that you actually want me to come in and work with you as a mentor? And he said, look, everything I've ever done, it's always been successful. And I don't really know what failure looks like. So I figure if I get you to come on board, at least you'll know straight away what failure looks like. And I didn't know whether to take that as a compliment or as a bit of a backhander. But mentorship, I think, for investors, and if they've had a lot of experience working with different industries and different startups, the ability to give back as a mentor is really, really important. We can't just keep taking from the startup community and expecting a return. We've got to be able to put back, and that's not just always by way of money, but by offering ourselves as mentors to various founders or startup businesses. And it may be from day one, or it may be a business that's transitioning through that profit cycle, but to be able to go in and just do a little bit of a health check,
yep,
but also give the founder somebody to talk to, where they're actually having an honest communication, not just trying to sell stock. Yeah. And so that's been really, really good fun working in that space and trying to help startups understand what they should be looking for with mentor.
Well, look, they'd all be lucky to have you as a mentor. You're a fantastic person. I've known you for a while, and
thank you.
And really, the value you could add is amazing. So keep up the good work.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for coming in.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye.